physical world could be likened to a kind of shadow world, not in reference to negativity. Regular shadows you see casted upon surfaces occupy 2 dimensions of space. This is specifically in reference to the end face of the shadow on a surface, and not its volumetric body joining that 2D face to the 3D object blocking light. The shadow is giving a kind of rudimentary 2D presentation of a 3D object. You know from having a 3D perspective that if you were only to look at a shadow of an object, you would glean very little information about the 3D version of that object. It would be missing sensory information that is only relevant to the 3D world, such as texture, spectral color, transparency, and all the rest of the vast amount of information of what that object really looks like. For example, its angular configuration, suggestive weight, and physical history. The medium of shadow doesn't allow for such information to be expressed. There needs to be an extra dimension of information for such a higher magnitude of uniqueness to be observed. If you were to observe the shadow or silhouette of a common refrigerator, all you would see is a simple trapezoidal shape. You wouldn't be able to tell that it's an object that can be opened up and that can reveal all the delicious food, or lack thereof, inside. The shadow world doesn't hold the capacity allowing for those perceptions. And poetically speaking, if all you could see were shadows, you probably wouldn't even be able to imagine those extra dimensional qualities. You would look at one shape and think something with a similar shape is the same kind of thing, even though with an extra dimension of information, those 2 shapes could be the difference between your best friend and a complete stranger. The physical world is a similar phenomenon to this hypothetical world of shadows. The 3D objects are the shadows of 4D objects, and the evidence that 4D objects exist is that you can observe their 3D version change through time linearly. Another piece of evidence that there is dimensionality beyond the classically labeled 3D objects is the fact that you have a memory. Really, the fact that you have a mind at all shows you exist as physical parts and beyond physical parts, but that's an entirely different rabbit hole to dive into. As a side note, 4D is a general term being used to describe physical objects as a shadow, just like how the term 3D is being used as an umbrella term to describe physical objects. This use of the term 4D isn't just about an extra dimension of space, like what defines a tesseract or a pentachoron. Regarding memory specifically, there needs to be an extra volume of real, tangible information in order for you to extract a past experience and somehow recreate it in the present, either through mental visions, feelings, and mental associations like remembering language. All these experiences correspond to a physical 3D brain state. As such, the reason this information is accessible at all is because there is only now, and your nervous system can allow you to connect to that 4th volume, seemingly beyond the present. That volume that makes a 3D object 4D is the quality of a 3D object seeming to be outside of your current focus of time. That 4D realm is being somewhat accessed as an experience of memory. The fact that objects appear to change through time is the effect of seeing multiple versions of that 3D object one after another, which are multiple faces of its 4D state. In this context, seeing an object change through time is analogous to seeing the basic dark shape of a shadow. As you observe through time, you are seeing a limited, fixed version of something that exists beyond that filtered observation. The time effect is allowing you to see different facets of an object with a kind of volume beyond 3D physicality. Referring back to the lack of observable qualities of a 2D shadow, just like if you were to look at a simple shadow of a 3D object, you could very easily think that object lacks uniqueness because of its similarities to another object shadow. A slice of cheese could easily be seen as a floppy disk in the shadow world. If you applied the state of observation to the physical world, you would see no difference between objects beyond their 3D shape, size, color, texture, etc. You would look at two similar looking people and think they are more or less the same because you are only observing and focusing on that limited dimensional portion of what they are. In this context, seeing somewhat beyond the 3D aspect of a person would be like being able to see multiple versions of them at once, wherein you could look at a person change in the present and simultaneously see a relevant set of future potentials and past versions of them just as vividly as you see a singular them with regular 3D vision. And just as you can see a shadow as a flat, lifeless counterpart of a 3D object, a 4D object would make its 3D version just as flat, colorless, and lacking in information. The key phrase in all this is seeing somewhat, because you by definition would no longer be a human to actually see, if you could even call it that, the higher magnitude version of that 3D observation. The 4D world requires a completely different kind of eyes. In this context, 4D vision would allow you to see through and around 3D objects just as easily as you can see through and around 2D shadows. 3D objects would no longer be seen as objects, they'd just be slightly more complex shadows. The 3D shadow principle is that the 3D physical world is but a shadow of a bigger 4D world. The observation experience labeled physical matter and energy is a translated portion of a bigger, largely unobserved experience. Simply put, the universe is in all actuality a glimpse of a holographic multiverse. Just like you shining 3D light upon a 3D object and seeing a 2D rendition of that object, what you perceive as a 3D object consisting of physical matter and energy is an offshoot of higher dimensional energy information and its structures. The bigger part exists simultaneously with the little part, but you only perceive the 3D face of that 4D energetic information material because it provides the human experience. The 4D structure exists with its version of a light source within your consciousness, and as a human, you perceive a 3D portion of that energetic material as an ever-changing expression of space, time, and force. You are the universe.